Pegasus School. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a huge fan of your school. I've met so many wonderful families that have come out of this Pegasus School, and I love your vision for education, and I just support you guys as parents of the foundation that you're laying for each of your kids. It's beautiful. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about overcoming anxiety. And over 40 million people in the United States suffer from anxiety disorders. 40 million. I mean, that's a lot. So today we're just going to kind of focus on what the symptoms of childhood anxiety look like, what the causes are, what you can do at home to help manage anxious symptoms and stress. And then I also, because of just the situation of the world right now with forest fires, people getting shot in Las Vegas, so much of this we can't stop our children from hearing about. And so I also want to talk about how to talk about these kind of crisis things that happen in the world with our kids too. So let's first look at some symptoms. All right, so there's several different symptoms that come with childhood anxiety, and this is a whole span. We're talking about from basically separation anxiety disorder to phobias to generalized anxiety. So in separation anxiety, there's excessive distress or fear of being away from the attachment figure. Okay, excessive worry about losing major attachment figures or about possible harm to them, such as illness, injury, disasters, or death. And this often starts to happen at around, and some separation anxiety is normal, but it starts to happen around age 4, 5, when children start to realize a little more of what we call object permanence or impermanence. So basically that people come and go. Like there are, sometimes people move, people die, grandparents die. They start to become more aware of that not everybody always stays in your life. But somatic complaints are very common for children, and we'll often see a lot of headaches or stomach aches first with kids before they even start to talk about what they're worried about. Sometimes it's even like a weird pain in their body. They'll say, "Oh, my elbow hurts," or they kind of focus on one thing, and then you have to kind of sit with them. Well, I wonder what that elbow is really telling us that you're hurting, and then through those conversations, you start to find out a little more of these other things that they worry about and they want to talk about. Then there's also children that exhibit social withdrawal. So sometimes anxiety makes kids want to not play with other children or not want to be as talkative. Then there's also development of phobias. And this happens, with all kinds of kids. It could be a certain thing of like, well, there's maybe a monster, in my closet, or I can't sleep because I heard somebody tell me this about, some little boy said this happened to him, and now this could happen to me. And so their imagination starts to go. And so phobias can be very common. Then school refusal, that's often linked to separation anxiety, or the child is avoiding something that's happening at the school, which is causing them to not want to go to school. And if that's really out of character for your child, then you always want to find out, okay, well, what's really at the bottom of this one? Like what would stop you from wanting to be at school? And then also unusual perceptual experiences where you feel that someone is looking into your room. And sometimes when kids get a little more fearful or they have nightmares, they start to worry about, oh, someone's looking in my room, or I feel like there's somebody in the corner of my room, even though that's not existent. Does anyone remember the Frances Bedtime series? Does anyone know that book? She has those little, remember, and she's got the little rocker, and then there's all that stuff on that rocker, but she's convinced there's something in her room, and then the dad goes, look at all this clothing on this rocker, right? So that's a really good example of unusual perceptual experiences. Okay. So there's several causes to anxiety, but the first one that we always look at is the top 3, which is basically a biological genetic disposition. There's also then personality and then environment. So it's this triad that really is the causal for anxiety. But why is genetic disposition kind of, important here? Because genetics get expressed based on stimulation and environment. So basically, you could have a genetic disposition towards anxiety, but if you're in a family that is pretty regulated and handles stress pretty easily, recognizes, whoa, okay, we've just been doing too much, we need to kind of slow things down for a little while, or yeah, I'm a little worried about that, but tell me more about how you're feeling about that, where they handle anxiety in a more regulated way, then that genetic expression isn't going to express to the same level. But if you're in a home environment where, say, there's chronic alcoholism, where you're fighting, high conflict, domestic violence, this kind of the culture of anxiety is constant all the time in the home, then that child's genetic disposition is going to get expressed because the environment is asking that to come out. Does that make sense? So us as parents have the opportunity to really look at what is the environment that we're creating at home when it comes to anxiety. How do we handle our own anxiety? We'll go a little more into this, but you really can help buffer this at home for your kids and for yourselves. Personality is also another aspect where some people are a little more prone to anxiety based on genetic disposition, and then other people also kind of let things just kind of go off their shoulders. It's like it's not a thing. They're not as prone to anxiety as much. So personality is another key. Some people are very shy. Shyer kids sometimes do socially withdraw a little more. They have a harder time talking to others, to asserting themselves, getting themselves out there. And so with kids that are a little shyer, we do have to find ways to challenge them in smaller ways to come out of their shell. Not maybe in really big ways initially, because we need to create some kind of stepping stones for them to feel confident in the little steps so they can take on something bigger after. And also anxiety can be linked with parent overprotection and intrusiveness. So does anyone, and it's okay to admit this, does anyone feel like a helicopter mom at all? A little bit? Yeah. So oftentimes it's because you're kind of carrying your own anxiety about, you want things to go well for your child, and you want them to be at their best and get and receive the best all the time, and that's all really good. But sometimes what happens is we're buffering our kids from actually experiencing the bruise or the hurt, and they kind of need it. They need to go through those things so that they can grow up and become more resilient. And then the last one is cognitive distortions, and that's where, all of us have different distortions that we think either about ourselves, which is like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable, I'm going to fail, I have to be perfect. And so, some of our kids can develop these beliefs. I'm bad. Has anyone heard their child at age 4 or 5 say, I'm bad? Has anyone heard that? Am I really the only one that my 3 kids have said I'm bad? Really? Okay, yeah. So, that's often like the cluster statement for kids of once they're 4 and or even 3, where they've misbehaved and you've called them on it, and they go, I'm bad, right? And they go off in the corner, and it's kind of their way to not deal with. They're first of all probably embarrassed that they misbehaved, and so they just say, I'm bad, as like this blanket statement, and they don't understand the complexity. No, you are not a bad person because you took that toy from your friend. It's just you made a bad choice, right? And so it's through the next years of their development that us as parents and as teachers, we really want to continue to refine that for them of like, you're separating your actions from who you are. Okay, so part of what we want to offer to our kids when they are feeling anxious is something what I call the calm to calm experience, because our children are sponges to our own anxiety. So basically we have something called mirror neuron systems. Does anyone familiar with mirror neuron systems? Okay, great. So all of us have a developed mirror neuron system. Now, does anyone have any children on the spectrum? So what the research has shown, and correct me if you know of anything different here, but for children on the spectrum, they're actually lacking in their mirror neuron systems compared to other children within normal range. So what happens is mirror neuron systems basically reflect back what they're picking up from someone else. This is basically our ability to show empathy, to feel anxiety of what someone else is feeling, to feel joy of what you're picking up all the cues and what you see, coming from somebody else. So self-regulation really is key. And for a lot of the moms and dads that I've seen in my parenting classes, whether it's no drama discipline or the conscious mothering class, they have a hard time with, I just get so provoked, when he's not listening to me, and I'm losing my mind out of this. Like, sometimes I don't even like this kid, It's like, yeah, I know. And when your kid feels that you don't like them, okay, which you're probably emanating in those moments, right? Sponge, mirror, neuron system, then they pick that up and they feel that. And they act out even more, okay? So the more regulated you are as a parent, taking that deep breath, if you have to even go into the bathroom and shut it for like 2 minutes, the issue will still be there when you leave. Then handle it later, okay? I promise the issue will still be there. And sometimes like your kids will kind of be in shock, like, you're leaving the room? You're not going to just, follow me after me and deal with this now? No, I'm not. I'm going to take a break, and then I'm going to come back to this with you. As we used to say in the mothering group, strike when the iron is cold. Strike when the iron is cold. Because when you strike when it's hot, you're going to escalate things a lot more. And for our kids that are a little more prone to anxiety, or even if you yourself are really prone to anxiety, you always want to strike when the iron is cold, because it will just escalate more for you. And for this is more of a generalization I'm going to make, but for a lot of people that I see with anxiety, they also deal with a lot of guilt, okay? So if you're really escalated, and then you're not happy with how you handle something, it's really hard for you to forgive yourself after, okay? And then you start to ruminate about it because it's upsetting to you that you behave that way. So this is really a very key thing for you to take care of yourself and take care of your kids. Strike when the iron is cold. So don't punish your child also for being anxious, because as we said with that triad, with environment, personality, and genetic disposition, some of our children are more prone to anxiety, and so we have to think of a tool set to best help them, to serve them. Okay, so what's the rhythm and routine of your household? This is kind of one of those keys to managing anxiety at home that a lot of people don't really talk about, because they think more in terms of just like deep breathing and mindfulness techniques to manage anxiety. But really the flow of your household can really create an environment that is a lot more calming to you. So how does your day breathe? So for instance, in the morning, is that I get the kids up and I only have 45 minutes to get everything done, lunches, breakfast, teeth brushed, and you're having to manage all of that on your own, right? And then get out the door and be on time for school. How do your kids do with that kind of time frame? Are they stressed out? Is there high conflict? Is there a carpool that always has to constantly wait for you guys because people aren't getting out the door? Think about that. If it's stressful, then you have to reevaluate if I'm starting the morning like this with my kids and I don't like who I am in the process of this, I don't like how I'm handling them, I don't like that I don't have enough time, then you have to reevaluate how you're doing things in the morning. Since 2004 to now 2017, we have now decreased our playtime for children by 8 hours per week. That's significant because of how scheduled we are as families. And what we have done is we have basically taken classes, after school classes and practices, and replaced that as playtime. Okay? Because we want to continue to build our kids to be really good at these different skills, and we've started really early to do that. But we're actually still missing the real value of just imaginary playtime with our kids. And also all the social aspects that come with that too, of being able to have that time during the day. Okay, so reduce anxiety also by incorporating a consistent routine. So do you typically have dinner at a set time? Do you typically go to bed at a set time? You know how routine is so crucial to babies? it's still crucial to us even through grade school. I mean, we get more flexibility as we go, but even for yourselves as adults, does anyone just recognize, oh man, I haven't been going to bed at a decent time. I need to get back into a better routine. Like, routine is just so key for good health. So the more you keep a set routine with your kids, that they can expect what's about to happen, there's that sense of safety that comes with that, and it's very comforting for them. And it helps reduce anxiety symptoms because they can prepare in advance. They know what's coming ahead of them. Whether it's even like carving out a Sunday from like 3 to the rest of the time or whatever, but really look at like, how can we create more downtime for my family? And downtime doesn't always have to look like, oh, we're just going to sit on the couch and watch TV together. No. It could be just going to the beach or taking a walk or a hike together. It could be just being quiet and reading together with your kiddos. But it should be shared quality time where you're actually connecting with one another, that you have eye contact with one another, that you're not just texting somebody in a different room, right? You're actually being together. Okay, so here's some tools now to help anxious children. Okay, one thing I like to talk about is the highlights and lowlights. Does anyone know this? What was the highlight of your day? What was the lowlight? What was the roses of your day? What was the thorns? And why do I say this? Well, because in some ways, it's a fun child way of practicing gratitude. What was something you were thankful for? What was something that was the challenge, right? Now, a lot of parents that I've worked with in the past might use highlights and lowlights at dinner time. They might also use it at tuck-in, like, let's talk a little more about your day. And so children typically at tuck-in, when they're kind of laying there with mom or dad, share a little more about their day, and then you can help them kind of process through it. Oh, so that did happen. Well, oh my gosh, what did you do? And when you hear the highlights or the lowlights, that's not your cue to fix it. Right, as parents, you listen and you just advocate and you go, oh my gosh, really? You're just incredibly empathetic, but you don't try to give them solutions and how to solve anything. You just need to listen. Another tool is be a planner. So do your best to have them understand what the schedule is for the most part. Now remember, with our littler kids, does anyone have like 4 or 5-year-olds in here? Any kindy kids, right? Now they're just kind of starting to adjust on like, hey, what do we even have school tomorrow? Like that idea of like what's happening the next day isn't always fully grounded. So, having a calendar up so the kids can read or aware, or even like little pictures of what you're doing can be helpful to help them prepare. Being a planner, letting them know ahead of time, later we're going to have the snack, but then after this, we're going to go ahead and start to do homework. And like little reminders like that continue to help lower anxiety because they know what to expect. And then there's also relaxation techniques. There's breath work, where you can learn a 4-7-8 count. Inhale for 4, hold it for 7, release for 8 with your kids. Sometimes if our children, though, are already so anxious and got riled up, it's hard for them to go ahead and listen to your directives about, hey, hold that breath for 4 and, or inhale for 4 and hold it for 7. Sometimes we've already lost that moment. But when you start to see a kid get a little anxious, you want to try to catch it before it really escalates. Does anyone have like a snow globe at home? Okay, this is one of my favorite techniques for my kids that have a tendency to get a little anxious or overthink about things. So you shake the snow globe, and then you ask your child to pick one thing that's floating and follow it all the way to the bottom. Okay, and once they lose that little piece of snow or that little star, then find a different star and follow it all the way to the bottom, taking deep breaths as you do that. And that's a great mindfulness technique, and it's fun for children because they get to look at something. It's very hard for kids to just concentrate on, follow your breath, listen to it, and then if your mind gets distracted, tell it not now. I mean, that's the things that we do as adults when we're trying to practice mindfulness. So a little snow globe like that is really helpful for our kids. And then the other segment is resiliency tools when it comes to dealing with anxiety. So we really want to increase the emotional vocabulary for our children. Research shows for kids that are bullied, kids that are bullied have a lower emotional vocabulary. Children that can talk about how they feel are less prone to being bullied. Okay, so this emotional vocabulary, or EQ, I mean, this is something that all of us should be working with our kids. And then don't immediately try to fix your child's anxiety. You want to listen and offer empathy as much as possible. And it's what we call in no drama discipline, connect and then redirect. So the more you really hear what's happening with your child, listening on a thought empathy level as well as a feeling empathy level, that really helps our kids feel more understood. And then there's something called resource tapping. So I'm trained in EMDR. Is anyone familiar with EMDR? Okay, so some of us are. So it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing disorder, reprocessing therapy. And so it is basically the #1 therapy for single incident trauma. And it's evidence-based. It's been around for 25 years. And so now as they have been working more with EMDR, we're realizing, hey, it's really good for depression and anxiety as well. And so another aspect is attachment-focused EMDR, which I'm also trained in now. And then, as I said earlier, anxiety due to shyness requires small challenges. I kind of spoke about that already, but you do want to work with a kiddo that is shy by giving them opportunities that they can be successful at in small ways and then build from there. Okay, so how are you managing your own anxiety? We've talked a lot about our kids. But if we're going to create this calm to calm experience, or even the culture of your home and how your day is breathing, we really always have to look first at how are you managing your own anxiety. So if you're more prone to anxiety, what are you doing for your own self-care to make sure that it's not bleeding out to your family and others? And also that you're taking care of yourself in a healthy way. So are you getting adequate exercise? What's your nutrition like? Do you have to reduce in caffeine, just like in terms of like the physical things for anxiety? Are you having, do you have close friends that you talk to regularly, that you spend really good relational time with? If you need to see a therapist, do you look for those resources so that you don't have to hold on to all of this stuff just on your own? In fact, people that are secure connectors or securely attached always know when they're out of their scope, okay? When they need help beyond what they can do for themselves. And they feel the freedom that they can go ahead and do that for themselves. So managing our own anxiety helps us stay more regulated so that we're more regulated for our kids and for all that we do. So I just want to leave you with that idea when it comes to how are you managing your own? Like, are you breathing regularly during the day? Are you getting adequate sleep? These are the kind of questions we really have to ask, because if you're feeling more anxious, some of it could be just more physically linked because you're not getting adequate sleep, or you've eaten really terribly over the last few weeks, or you're not getting enough exercise. And so you just need to kind of get back in routine, right, as we've been talking about today. Okay, and then the last piece for today is when traumatic events happen, how to process this. I had one girl a few years back, I think she was about 11, and she had a full-blown anxiety disorder because she had this smartphone, and she was, and I'm not saying smartphones are the cause of it, okay, but I do think the information that kids are receiving, sometimes they can't actually process what they're reading. So when she heard about the tsunami, I think it was in Japan. Do you guys remember that, like a few years back? And how all these people died and lost their homes, and she's reading this on her smartphone in the 6th grade. It was like, oh my gosh, could this happen to us? We live near the ocean, and so she couldn't sleep at night. She was really worried about, that this could happen here in Orange County and to her family. And she just didn't have the skill set to fully understand it. Right? So first of all, you really want to reassure your kids that you're going to do everything to keep them safe, okay? Everything within your power you're going to do to keep them safe. You want to also encourage them to really talk about their feelings and then ask more open-ended questions about how that made them feel. So for instance, if someone comes home and says, Mom, did you hear about what happened in Las Vegas at that shooting at that concert? I don't want to ever go to a concert again, Mom. That sounds terrible, right? I don't want to go. Then you want to say, well, okay, so you're right. That shooting did happen in Las Vegas, and it was at a large festival concert. How did that make you feel when you heard about that? Where did you hear that from? Who did you hear it from? Tell me what you were feeling when you first heard about that. So the more open-ended questions you ask, you get more of the perspective of where your child was going with it, okay? But answer questions as honestly as possible and to the developmental level of that child. So you can't go into the real facts, of course, with your 5-year-old about, a shooting that happens in Vegas, but you can say, yes, guns were used and guns hurt people, and so people did get hurt. And if your child knew that some people died, yes, people did die. But that also gives you the opportunity then, if you have your own faith or how you understand death, that you can talk about that as well with your kiddo. And then stick with the facts and focus on how it makes them feel, as I said earlier, and protect them also from what they don't need to know as much as you can. So that might mean that you don't have the TV on, the news on when they're coming home from school or even after during homework and stuff. Maybe that's where you just shut that stuff off. And then when you want to look at the news after the kids go to sleep, then that's when you do it. But we really want to be careful because with some of this stuff, that happens, it's just on the TV the entire time, whether you're any kind of channel you're flipping, and then the footage and images that they're showing. And it can be, secondary trauma. It can, to hear that for other people or to see that what's happening to other people, it can be very hard for children to process, let alone, for us adults, it's been hard to process. Also, avoid discussing worst case scenarios. As much as possible, because a worst case scenario is a potential catastrophe, right? It actually hasn't happened. So if you go into these worst case scenarios, then you're actually increasing more anxiety about what the future could hold for your child versus, staying more calm and thinking through the current facts of the situation. And then limit excessive watching and listening to graphic replays of any traumatic event. And then stick to your daily routine as much as possible, as that also helps your kids stay more regulated. That's all I have to share for today. I'm going to open up to some questions. I hope that was helpful for you.